Hello and welcome to the Circuit Breakers interview series podcast series. I'm your host, Steve Semler, and today I'm joined by Breanna Cunningham, who's a founder of Code Technology, an innovative Minneapolis-based company that collects patient outcome data to improve healthcare outcomes. Bree, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I appreciate the opportunity and your time. I'm Breanna Cunningham. I'm a mom of 3 kids, a wife, and a trauma nurse by trade, and founder of Code Technology. So Code Technology, it stands for Clinical Outcomes and Data Engineering, kind of nerdy, so it's an acronym. And we collect outcome data for hospitals and private practices around the country, predominantly in orthopedics, but we do other subspecialties as well. And we do it as a service. So, if you ever done like a Myers-Briggs personality test or a DISC, so believe it or not, there is a Myers-Briggs for your rotator cuff or your hip arthritis. So these are surveys that provide quantifiable information about your pain, function, and quality of life. And they've really become the gold standard in medicine for defining, seeing if an intervention was successful. I'd like to say, well, actually, this is true. I liked them before they were trendy. So my husband and I, he's a trauma surgeon. In our clinical days, we're doing research and found how valuable this patient-reported outcome data was. As a matter of fact, there was a project we were doing at the time where we were comparing X-rays, right? So you have a perfect X-ray against patient-reported outcome scores. And it was a very humbling project where we would see a perfect X-ray that was textbook and the patient was miserable, and then, vice versa. So it was important information, but let me tell you, it is a pain to collect. You have to have patients fill it out. So there's a dependency there. And you need it not just before an intervention, but after an intervention and really on an annual basis. So we would get grants and we would have funding. We'd hire people to help. Collection was great. The grant would be done. We had no money. Collection would just stop. So we were looking for a more efficient way to do it. And here we are. Actually, a fun story. My husband didn't believe it would work. He's like, this will never work. He's an orthopedic surgeon, right? So this is not going to work. You need the patients to be in clinic. They have to be held hostage. But what we do is we collect the data as a service. So we enroll the patients, we contact them, and we obtain the information.
Yeah. How does that help? How does the data get used to help improve the outcomes?
Yeah. Well, now it's fun because our registry is huge. So the benchmarking opportunities are fantastic. And as a matter of fact, when I'm having like a sad entrepreneur day, I just go on the data and just play. I actually had an opportunity to do that this morning, which was fun. So how it's used, just because some practical implications, if you think about implants, like the actual implants that go into your body, there's a lot of different brands out there, and there's a lot of different costs associated with those brands. And just in a hip replacement alone, there's 500% variability in the cost of that implant.
Wow.
So then ask yourself, well, what is the cost compared to the outcome? So in healthcare, one of the ways that we define value is the outcomes divided by the cost.
Yeah.
By outcomes, excuse me. So, making decisions about what implant to use and why, making decisions about when to have surgery, right? So I'm approaching 40. So my party trick is that when my friends tear their ACL, that's not a surgery you have to have, right? We type it in our registry and say, should you? And if you do have surgery, what does that look like a year from now versus if you don't? So I think from a patient perspective, it helps with decision-making. From an institutional perspective, it helps with making decisions about cost that don't impact outcomes in a negative way. And then also, not every surgeon's great, right? So it's looking for issues. We also see things like early signs of failure. These, so if we've had implants that have been taken off the market, so we use a lot of predictive analytics. In the past, we only were able to know when an implant failed when the failure started happening, right?
Yeah.
We saw patients come back for reoperation. Now we're able to see patients progress, early signs of failure, and get implants off the market much sooner.
That's huge, both for costs and for patient outcomes and the pain and the mobility that all goes along with that. Neat. What were some of the things that led you to start this as a business, and figure out the business models for it?
Yes. So I feel like being an entrepreneur, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes. So I kind of have, by nature, I had a pool cleaning company when I was younger. Just kind of always had an entrepreneurial mindset. Actually, the first product that we had was not our orthopedic data collection product. It was a cardiac arrest product. And it was a beautiful product, and it was similar in nature where it was collecting data. But the issue is I couldn't sell it to the hospital. Why? Because these patients actually cost the hospital a lot of money. Okay. Orthopedic surgery is a revenue driver for hospitals. People think, I need a hip replacement. You get a hip replacement. If you're in Africa, do you get a new hip if you have arthritis or you have cane? Now, I will say it is the right surgery to have, and it makes you move, and movement is medicine. That's a whole other conversation. But with cardiac arrest, I couldn't sell that product. So it was going to have to be a nonprofit, which I don't have experience in, and just kind of became more of a passion project. So when we built the system out and started working on the orthopedic and it started working, I thought, well, we did a beta and it worked well. And then I said, can I sell it? Sold it to a couple of practices, perfected kind of the operational model of it, and then scaled it.
Neat. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting way of figuring out where the market is and what the market will pay for, profit versus nonprofit way. Yeah.
It's interesting. I say we did it before it was cool. We went to market in 2015, and fast forward to today, and what we do is now mandated by the government. So if you take CMS requires what we do, which is great for sales. It's nice to have an event like that. But there were some painful years in there where it was, is this going to be the new gold standard? Is it really going to be embedded in the fabric of reimbursement and value-based care or not? So it was a risk, and it was scary jumping away from my safe job.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm glad I did it.
Cool. What have you had to do to make the business, the entrepreneur side of things work, as you've gotten into, both the sales, the operation, the data side, all the different parts that, have to wear all the hats as the entrepreneur starting out?
Endurance and a mindset of continual learning. There's nothing, it's, you're a jack of all trade, but a master of none, and you have to be. And I think, as we've scaled and gotten bigger, you kind of that refines a little bit, right? So it's less of a, Swiss Army knife and more of like, okay, we need a steak knife here. And it just becomes a little bit, more prescriptive. But I think one is just endurance. This is such an endurance sport, and it's just energy out and continuing to put energy out. And then just, the willingness to suffer, the willingness to do it when no one is watching and when it's really hard and when people don't understand. I think that is a big part of the journey.
I know AI is being explored, especially in the medical imaging side of things, for being able to figure out, like you're saying, here's what perfect looks like. Now AI, tell me if this current shot is, where the problem areas are, things like that. Help with faster, theoretically less expensive diagnosis. What technologies or what things are you keeping up with yourself these days?
That's a great question. I always feel like information starved. Like I love learning all the new, latest and greatest technology, and I'm pretty fascinated by AI, and I see some amazing use case and implications in healthcare. You brought up imaging. That's an excellent use case where you can train a model. Big hope in that. There's also a lot of hope in being able to identify, using cluster AI to identify early signs of failure. And that's something that, when I mentioned getting implants taken off the market, that's been really helpful. In our space, kind of the data space, we've been using predictive analytics for quite some time. And so I feel as though there was this wave of excitement. We're doing a lot, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. And you can't automate all of it, right? You still have to do a model, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with the patient communication and messaging. There's also a lot of medical legal risk around it too. So I've kind of been watching that front of saying, all right, at what point can you use AI, and who's going to be brave enough to do that for when someone's on call and they're answering questions. And there's already models out there, but there's a lot in the market that needs to be figured out about it, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, one of my healthcare insurance or health insurance clients has been wrestling with what AI will make sense, what can we accept, where are the legal boundaries, because they've got a lot of they're primarily Medicare, Medicaid, plus individual family plans. So they're a little bit different than the employer-provided insurance market. So they need to put their own twist on it to be able to make good decisions as well.
Right. And then who owns the liability, right? Is the medical legal perspective? Is it the AI? Is it the tech company? Is it the hospital? So, there's just a lot of gray right now. And, I'd say that's life with being an entrepreneur too, right? You live in the gray until you figure it out. So I would love to say I'm doing more active work in it, but I'm kind of sitting back and watching, have some friends in the space and just seeing how it gets adopted.
Yeah, neat. Do you have like a favorite success story from code technology where where something has gone really well and you'd like to kind of celebrate or share that?
Good question. I think looking back, and maybe I have some bias because I just shared the founding story, so that in here. But I think we got into this space strategically and made a good calculated risk on where the market was going. So I think that was a success of sitting back, watching, and making an early but educated decision on that. Other success stories. I always get excited about things that we see in the data. There's nothing better than catching something that could have been catastrophic.
Yeah.
I also think too, one of the models that we've employed that I'd say is successful, because I say proud of our product, is that we have kept it very just person and people centric. We are not a true SaaS company. We are a SaaS enabled service. And our account managers are in the data and helping our clients and talking to the patients and really keep that human element. And I believe that attributes to a lot of our success. We're known for kind of our drop the mic moments, right? Our differentiators, our capture rate. So our capture rate is so high. And people always ask, oh, you must use AI. We use technology, but it is the people, the analytics, and the strategies that are employed and kind of just that day-to-day service that makes it so high. And then the second is our reporting, and we're able to report and benchmark because we have that much data. So I think that is a big success, is that we stayed really focused. We didn't get distracted on other engagement platforms, right? We took the product in other directions, and we really said, this is our niche, this is our specialty. We are going to do this and do it really well, and then partner with people that can do other things that we're not as good on versus building on our own.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense, especially strategically being able to figure out what you're going to say no to is the differentiator between being able to have strategic focus and just being kind of tactical.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's hard too when your competition is offering more, right? So, and those are difficult decisions to make, but I think that's a success story, is that we stayed focused.
Yeah. Well, if you could wave a magic wand over your business and make like one thing better, or relieve one key obstacle, what would that be?
No. Well, HR. I don't like any function of HR. I have to put on my Toby hat, like from the office, and get into that persona when I'm doing HR work. But I would say, business is easy. People are hard.
Yeah.
And especially in a remote work culture, is if I can wave a wand and say, how do I create a culture that's fun and enjoyable? And I'm someone that I like to work. I find joy in work. And I don't have as much joy as I did when I was showing up in a trauma bay as an ER nurse. Or even when I was walking around the office, and we had an office in Phoenix before we moved here and in Minneapolis, and just getting that in between time. So I think if I could figure out, I keep waiting for a book to drop, and maybe you know of one. I mean, listen, I read a lot of how do you replicate that culture and that creativity and that connectedness in a remote environment that you get in a trauma bay, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the things I actually work on, and part of my kind of part of the thing that I described that I do for folks. I take overworked IT professionals and help them go from being kind of unsung back office miracle workers to being problem-solving stars who get the recognition and the appreciation that they deserve. And typically that means, I'm doing some work with them a little bit, but really working with the leaders to help them understand, hey, here are some small things you can do, especially in the remote and hybrid environment, to be able to ramp that up.
So go, give me your tips. I'm all ears.
I'll follow up with you on that one. Exactly. What would you, just to kind of conclude, what would be some tips that you would, or advice you'd offer to aspiring entrepreneurs or folks who are just kind of starting out or having difficulty with their businesses?
I think advice that I would give, I mean, just be really, really cautious and cognitive about the decision that you're making. And it always takes longer than you think. It always does. So it really is it's an endurance sport. And I use a lot of, I just started running recently. I'm a sprinter. I'm a gymnast sprinter. Like the running thing is new, but I think that it's a great analogy in many ways of running the business and just that consistency and the pace and not burning yourself out and knowing what days you need to be up at 4 a.m. to get the stuff done that everybody else will do, but also knowing that rest is productive. And I also think too, is just there's different phases in the business and each have their different joys and their challenges. And I think the early days are fun. And I also think in the early days, you are working with and attracting people to work with you that are kind of like-minded and are okay with that chaos, right? And as you get bigger, that chaos becomes a Tasmanian devil that's screwing things up. So I think it kind of gets lonelier as you're going up and less relatable, right? Like sometimes I'll have an idea, it's a bad idea, and people are like, oh, we should do that. And I'm like, no, challenge my thinking. Like that wasn't a good idea. So just as you grow and as the company grows, it becomes a little bit less like collaborative in a sense and more, I don't even know the word for it. But it's just different. It's just different than the early days.
Yeah, I mean, there's that organizational life cycle curve. So there's the entrepreneurial, the pioneering, the consolidation phase, restructuring, or reorganizing sort of thing.
One thing I started doing that actually this would be something I'd recommend to entrepreneurs: find out where you want to be revenue wise. I kind of think revenue wise because then a lot of problems shake out when you hit certain different levels of growth, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, I think of where I want to be revenue and where I'm at now. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I try to find people who are in that realm that I want to be, because it's been really helpful for me to see the problems that people are experiencing before they get there. I think all of us are by nature experiential learners. Some are better at learning from others' failures and sooner. And I'm trying, I strive to be in that category. It's not my nature, right? You tell me it's raining, I got to go look. I won't believe you. But I think that's been helpful, especially I'm a mom of 3 young kids and one has special needs. And so there's, and working for 2 working families. So there's always competing initiatives. So it's how do I maintain my personal life values? And a lot of times my life doesn't look like that, right? So how do I maintain that? And hearing other people as the problems that they're going through has been helpful for me. because it hits you and you're like, aha, I remember this person talking about them. And sometimes you think they're crazy, like, really, that's your biggest issue right now? And then 2 years later, you're like, oh, I get it, right? So that's been helpful.
Yeah. Well, for folks watching, these are some great tips. Remember, it's an endurance sport. Look ahead to see, like from podcasts and people who have been where you want to be, where you're moving, move toward that. Keep your eyes open. Lots of great tips. Thank you, Breanna. I really appreciate the help and the sharing here today.
Awesome. I hope it's helpful for the audience. Thank you for your time.
Great. And so for folks watching, when you're faced with challenges or problems in your own business, of course, consider these tips, consider what Bree has offered here. And as always, let me know. I can help with lots of stuff as well on the leadership and business side. Steve Semler here at FocalPoint LearningSim with Circuit Breakers. See you next episode. Thanks.